Good morning. I'm really excited today, and the reason this is so exciting for me is because Appeon has been working for several years to help modernize PowerBuilder and enable it to develop not only client-server applications, but also cloud-native applications. And over the years, with each major release, we've been doing a phased approach of releasing various features necessary to complete transformation. And with PowerBuilder 2021, we're essentially have completed that transformation where PowerBuilder can now very productively build cloud native applications. In today's keynote, I'm going to be talking about how PowerBuilder and the cloud and all of this fits in a post-pandemic future. This is obviously on a lot of our minds. It's changed our personal lives, how we work. It's disrupted things for the companies we work for. It's really been tough, and we're all in the same boat. So I want to talk about some positive things about how your IT systems can be evolved for a future post-pandemic. This little thing wreaked havoc, disrupted businesses. Some of you may have experienced mandated closures of your businesses. A lot of people have had to work remotely. There's a lot of labor shortages going on. There's been supplier disruptions. If any of you have tried to purchase a car recently, you know all about the chip shortages. And a lot of processes had to move from being a physical process to virtual, especially because of the closure. Simple things like printing a check in the office and mailing it. Now that people are all remote, how do you do that? It's really turned things upside down. New regulations that we have to face, and all of this has changed the customer as well, the customer's buying habits, their needs, and so on. And that requires our businesses to adapt to those changing needs. Now, all of these changes requires IT systems to be flexible, but unfortunately, IT systems today are rigid, and the pandemic really highlighted that. Why are they so rigid? In the old days, things were developed with a very monolithic on-premise architecture. That's how IT systems historically have been. For example, client-server. Some of it is complacencies, and a lot of it is high costs. To rewrite these things, there's no productive or automated tools to help move existing investments forward, at least not outside of the PowerBuilder realm. And so what is this rigidness? How does it manifest itself? Well, the very obvious thing we saw when people all of a sudden need to work remote, I can't access the apps that we need to use to do our work. Why? Because the apps were designed for on-premise deployments. So companies are scrambling to get this stuff onto a remote desktop and somehow provide remote access to it. Even when you're doing that, and you somehow get remote access, you still have security vulnerabilities when you start exposing your things outside of an on-premise environment. Why? Because these are client-server architectures and they weren't really intended to be used in this way. There's also performance issues when you start running things over the internet. Why? Because all of this code was developed not to run on a wide area network, for a local area network. And so the code's not been optimized to run in that fashion, or to run on a cloud server in a remote desktop environment where you have a lot of concurrent users. So a lot of times you need to spin up a lot of these virtual machines to support just a small number of users. And there's a lot of high IT costs, especially if you start hosting these things in a public cloud provider, AWS, Azure, and so on. Their pricing model is tied to a cloud architecture. So when you take a client server app and run that on the cloud, it becomes expensive. And of course, there's integration issues, because with client server apps, you have all your business logic trapped inside that app that can be only used by a human being who's interfacing with the app. It is not REST APIs that can be programmatically accessed by other applications or systems. So where are we today? Well, I'm sure you've all heard about the Omicron. We're basically back to where we began. Who knows? Maybe even worse, maybe not. We hope it's not going to drag out too long. But Dr. Anthony Fauci says we're going to have to start living with the virus. We're not going to be able to eradicate it. So regardless what happens, the whole point is that we need to have flexible IT architecture so that we can adapt to things, because we don't know what's going to happen. And we don't know what's the next pandemic or the next XYZ thing that our businesses are going to face. So when our IT systems are agile, we can respond very well to any situation. So PowerBuilder in a post-pandemic world, the way we envision an Appeon is that PowerBuilder should have a cloud-native architecture where you have your embedded SQLs, data windows, your business logic, all of that is running in a REST API enabled format. And all of that in our mind should be C#. C# is the programming language that Appeon is standardized on for server-side programming, not client-side. PowerBuilder is great at building client apps. That's in PowerScript. That's not going to change. If you want to do client server and you don't buy into this cloud native stuff, no problem. We have tons of customers on client server, and that's continuing, and we're enhancing that. Julie will be sharing with you in the product roadmap how we're going to do a lot of great things for client server projects. She's also going to explain why client server and PowerServer align. The two share the same client side. So anytime we do something for PowerServer, it's helping client server. Anytime we do something for client server, it's helping PowerServer. The two are aligned. But let's get back to talking about sort of where we think PowerBuilder apps should be evolving over time to this cloud-native architecture. So with these REST APIs running in a cloud-native format, you're running on .NET Core. You can containerize. You can orchestrate your containers. You can start implementing DevOps, for example, Azure DevOps. You can take advantage of various cloud security mechanisms, for example, OAuth, single sign-on, or Azure Active Directory. And because these are industry standard REST APIs, the way your app is going to access it can be over the internet, over standard HTTPS. And the app would go on the user's machine, and that's the visual part, right? And that's going to consume REST APIs. There's no longer a client-server architecture with a direct connection to the database. There's no SQL on the user machine. That's just the client-side scripting and the visual portion. And you have all of your good stuff, your data, in the cloud, and that's all exposed as REST APIs. Now, these REST APIs are not only for the PowerBuilder visual client app to consume it, but also can be accessed by other internal systems. For example, you have another system that needs to get the data or share the business logic. It's able to use that. Also, you're working with suppliers or partners, and with the pandemic, supplier disruptions and so on, you may need to shift who your suppliers are or what partners you're working with, and trying to onboard those and integrate your processes with them without having all this data and business logic exposed to standard REST APIs, it's going to not be possible, at least not quickly. So having these readily accessible REST APIs means you can onboard those new suppliers or partners very quickly. And there might even be new business models or new ways you can interact with your customers, where your customers consume services you provide through REST APIs. Some companies are doing that. And what you do with it is up to you. The point is, once you have all of these things in REST APIs, it's open and very flexible to be consumed and reused however you see fit. So let's take a look at PowerBuilder. Pre-pandemic, all these years, PowerBuilder has been a client-server tool building a monolithic architecture. Very productive, very rapid, and it fit its time. For yesteryears, on-premise model was fine. That's how things are done. The deployment of those apps was manual. That's a little bit of a headache where you had to deal with deploying those apps to users and updating it. Some companies have found creative ways around that. But overall, worked very well. Now, Sybase came along a number of years ago and saw the need of pulling business logic out and sharing that and exposing that through web services. And they did that with SOAP, because back in the day, SOAP was the way people did it. This tool set, while great, is producing kind of a rigid architecture unless you start heavily using SOAP. And even that SOAP was designed with a web architecture, not a cloud-native architecture. So even though you are doing web services, is not flexible, not going to run well on a cloud-native architecture. because it was using old .NET frameworks that were not designed to be run on the cloud. Now, what we're really excited about is PowerBuilder 2021 Cloud Pro Edition, how we've evolved it. We're keeping everything that's great about PowerBuilder that you love, the rapid application development, coding a client app in PowerScript, data windows, none of that's changing. You're still going to be able to generate client-server projects because we know customers, not everyone's going to go to the cloud right away. And in the end, maybe not everyone goes to the cloud, and your particular business may not benefit from it. But PowerBuilder has always been about giving you a flexible tool set to let you do what you need to do, not tie your hands back. And so it's important that we go beyond client server and not just limit PowerBuilder to be a client server tool. Now, on the client server side, we have done improvements in 2021 since much earlier versions of PowerBuilder that some people might be using, such as 12.x. So now you have the option, instead of manually deploying client server apps, you can automate that. It just takes a few days probably. It's basically configuration. There's no code changes required. It requires setting up an HTTP server, configuring your project, and by automating deployment, now you don't have to deal with updating your apps to users every time you make a change. It becomes a lot less overhead for you to distribute your apps. So client server has been enhanced. But what's really big in PowerBuilder 2021 is the cloud deployment. As I mentioned, we've been working through the major releases providing various pieces, and in 2021, we're giving you an automated cloud deployment solution. So not just for new development, but even an existing project that you've designed over many, many years to be a client-server app can generally, in just weeks, be converted and recompiled as a cloud-native application without extensive code changes. And we'll actually be going into more detail about this, as well as showing a demo. Now, other pieces we've added for the cloud is if you want to develop new REST APIs. So let's say you have some new business logic you want to add. People are constantly evolving their applications, changing their business processes. You're able to now develop REST APIs. That's done in C#, but it's using our .NET data store. Our .NET data store is a non-visual data window. So even though this is C#, it's going to be a lot like developing business logic in PowerBuilder. Not that much different. And we also provide an automated conversion tool called the PowerScript Migrator, which will allow you to extract business logic. So let's say you have some good business logic in your app that you feel, I need to pull this out. I need this to be a REST API and share that. We have an automated solution that if for non-visual code, it can convert 80 to 90%. And that's what you're putting into a REST API. REST APIs are not visual, is non-visual business logic. So you can get a high percentage of conversion of any of your NVOs, for example. So this now completes PowerBuilder, where you have a complete client server and cloud tool set. No matter what types of apps your company's looking to build, whether it's deploy your whole app to the cloud, develop web APIs, or even if you're just looking to stay on client server, we now have a better way for you to deploy that. So we think this tool set really equips companies to move forward in the post-pandemic world. Let's take a look at the PowerBuilder development process. So the first three parts, developing in PowerScript, doing client-server deployment, or doing a cloud deployment, including converting an existing app. What is that process like? It's the same as what you've always done. We have not changed PowerBuilder. We just make the same thing do much more than before. So you're still developing in the PowerBuilder IDE, still coding PowerScript. You still have the PB compiler, generating client-server app. None of that's changed. What we've added on top of this is that you could take your client-server project and configure that to be a smart client, which we call Power Client. That's the branding we use. But it's essentially a smart client for your app. And this smart client basically deals with the distribution and updates of your client-server apps to users. Now, of course, we've enhanced the PowerBuilder compiler to do more than client server. So now the PowerBuilder compiler can generate a cloud-native app, and we brand that as PowerServer. So we've also introduced a new utility called PB Auto Build. This PB Auto Build does a lot of things. It can integrate with Git or SVN and pull the source code out. It can then compile your project. It can generate a cloud-native PowerServer project. It can generate a smart client, Power Client project, or it could compile a client-server project, just traditional, where you still follow the same process you've been doing to get that app to users and update it. So no matter what project type you do, you can automate that. And we've also integrated with Jenkins. You don't have to use Jenkins, but if you want to get a full CI/CD process, you could. So this is what really is in the version 2021 that's evolving PowerBuilder to be a great tool to move our systems forward, to be a lot more flexible and productive. Now, let's take a look at the REST APIs. As I mentioned, that's done in C#, so PowerBuilder is the IDE for developing the client apps for coding in PowerScript. If you're coding in C#, we provide another IDE included with PowerBuilder called Snap Develop that allows you to very productively, not like Visual Studio, not like Entity Framework, the way that we would expect productive development to be, that's what Snap Develop offers, and that's why the name. Snappy, get things done in an instant. So Snap Develop IDE's modern IDE looks very similar to other modern IDEs you may have used if you use Visual Studio, or if you've used, for example, if you've done Java development with IntelliJ, looks similar to the modern IDEs. And yes, you are coding C#, but here's where things are different. All of that C# programming you're doing is around the .NET data store, and it provides all the same properties, events, and functions, and so you can develop in the same way. Actually, if you take a look at the code, it's going to be very, very similar. And what's going to come out of this process is industry standard REST APIs that run on .NET Core, which is cross-OS, cloud-native version of .NET, not like the old .NET stuff that PowerBuilder used to have in the old days that we deprecated. This is using the new .NET Core that Microsoft rebuilt from the ground up to be cloud native. So as I mentioned, programming in even though C# with the .NET data store, it makes it very much PowerBuilder-like. So here's a little snippet doing a retrieve of the data store. But this is all C# code. And this would be inside your web API, returning the data in JSON format to be consumed by PowerBuilder app or any other application or other systems. So cloud native architecture, I touched earlier about how there's high costs to run client server in the cloud because this is monolithic architecture. It was not designed to be cloud. And the way cloud providers such as AWS and Azure price things is under a cloud model. So you get penalized greatly for trying to run a client server app in a virtual desktop infrastructure on these cloud providers. So let's take a look at why a monolithic architecture is not granular and doesn't scale efficiently. So when you have one user on your virtual desktop in the cloud, you're going to have your entire app running for that one user, an entire instance. You could think of that as a whole machine. That user's desktop is replicated. You have your UI, that's the red box. You have your business logic, that's the yellow box. You have your data access logic, that's your embedded SQL and so on. That's the green box. All of that stuff is one big monolithic. It's not spread out into little pieces. It's one whole thing. It's all or nothing. And as more users come on board, let's say you have 2 more users, it's going to spin up 2 more instances. And we have 3 more users. So you're just replicating everything over and over again. It's very, very heavy. And that's why running client server on VDI just doesn't scale well. And any of you that have used Citrix or other things in the past know this. So that becomes very costly, makes Jeff Bezos very happy, pays for his spaceships, but not good for your company's bottom line. So let's take a look at cloud native architecture. Under a cloud native architecture, what is running on the user's machine, or even if you still want to use VDI, you can, but what is running on that VDI or the user machine is the user interface. That's it. And what you have on your cloud server could be in a Docker container or IaaS or whatever you want to use, is going to be your business logic and the data access logic. And all of that's separated. These are REST APIs, are very granular, and that's shared. So as more users come on board, you're spinning up more UI instances, for example, on the VDI or on the user's machine, in which case you're not even using any of the server computing power. That UI is running natively on the user's desktop, but it's still using the same two server instances of the REST APIs being shared. And those REST APIs are extremely scalable the way that PowerServer has been designed. And you can go ahead and run your own load test to confirm it's extremely scalable. We can typically see thousands of concurrent users on one single server with just a few CPUs and just a little bit of RAM. Now, imagine as more users come on board, you have some very heavy database queries. You don't have to spin up everything. It's all granular. You could spin up the REST APIs that handles database queries. You could bring that up. And let's say you're running like a batch process at the end of the day where it gets very intensive for just a short period of time. You can spin up another instance of just what's REST API that's handling that database query, and that could drop off. Now, all of this scaling up and scaling down, if you start to use Docker and Kubernetes and all these fancy cloud stuff, which you can, it can all be automated and dynamic. It's not you manually spinning these things up and down. It's in real time happening as your system demands it and then dropping down. And that makes the pricing really efficient if you take advantage of all these different technologies. So another benefit of a cloud-native architecture is it's going to inherently offer stronger security than client server. Why? Because cloud-native architecture was designed to be exposed over the internet. So you need to consider how you secure it in that environment. And so there's a lot of things inherently built in to cloud-native architecture that client server doesn't have. So the first big difference between cloud-native and client server architecture is on the client, you're not going to have a direct access to the database. So you don't have to expose your database out to the world. Okay. And also on the client machine, there's no SQL. A lot of people worry about SQL injection and things like that. There is no SQL on the user machine, but with a client server app on that machine is your SQL. Now, the interface with these cloud native apps is through REST APIs, and REST APIs have much stronger security. You can take advantage of token technology rather than doing basic authentication where you pass username and passwords back and forth. That's not the most secure way to do it. So with tokens, you can take advantage of the OAuth framework or JSON Web Tokens. If you're using cloud providers, for example, AWS, they actually are providing security as a service or REST APIs. They call it Cognito, and that does authentication. So you could take advantage of all these, but with a cloud-native architecture and the way we're doing things for PowerBuilder, it's an open design following industry standards. It's no different than another C# REST API that somebody might develop with Visual Studio, for example. So you can implement your own security if you like, if you don't want to go to our built-in options. But we provide these built-in options because we know as Power developers, you want things taken care of and keep things simple so you can focus on the important part, the business logic. Now, anytime you have stuff going over the network, you do want to use TLS encryption, and that's supported both in the database layer between the web API and your database server, as well as between the web API and the client. You can take advantage of TLS 1.2. A few other security features we built into PowerServer is that the client app that goes on the user machine, you can sign that. Of course, with client server, you can also sign it as well, but what we've done is we've integrated that into the PowerBuilder IDE, making it very easy to sign your app. But here's a couple cool features that a traditional client server app doesn't have. All of your P code files are encrypted. We're using strong AES encryption so that it cannot be reverse engineered or tampered with and modify your source code, do anything malicious with it. And also, PowerServer, the client app, will do an integrity check. So before the executables execute, where then a virus or something malicious could be introduced to the user machine, it verifies hash values of all of the files and makes sure that that was generated by the PowerBuilder deploy that you did. And if it's not going to execute it. So some of you may have heard of PowerServer before, and that's because we have a 2020 version, we have a 2019 version. In fact, we've been doing this for almost 20 years now. So this is something we're very passionate about. We love PowerBuilder, and we love it if it could build web or internet applications with the same productive process that you do today. So PowerServer it has existed, but it's actually very different than what we're bringing today in 2021. So even though the name is the same and at a high level does the same thing, you could think of it sort of as an entirely new product. So let's take a look at the older version of PowerServer, what it was, so we can see how things have evolved in 2021. So the previous PowerServer versions, yes, you're coding in PowerScript, but what we were doing behind the scenes is translating to JavaScript so we could run it in a web browser. And the result of that was at most 60% of PowerBuilder features were supported. So you have to dumb down your application, and a lot of people are not happy about that. I need this, I need that, I can't give this stuff up. There was no IDE debugging, so you do have a PowerScript debugger, but it's not debugging the JavaScript. And so that was very much lacking. The architecture was a monolithic web. So it's a web app, but it's an entire app. It's not REST API enabled. It does not run cloud natively on AWS or Azure. You'd have to spin up a VM on Azure, and it could only run on IaaS. It was not very conducive to doing containerization and things like that. And it didn't use the .NET Core. We developed the older generation of PowerServer before .NET Core existed. So it's based on the old .NET 4 stuff, just like PB.NET. Now, this stuff is JavaScript, did run in a browser, but there's no way in just pure HTML and JavaScript you can do everything that PowerBuilder does and replicate the data window. You've all used HTML apps, and you know compared to PowerBuilder, they're much more dumbed down. So the way we got around that and still run in the browser is we did a browser plugin. That was the answer. We developed this solution before continuous integration and continuous development was popular, so we never really designed the PowerServer older versions to fit into that well. And as a result of a lot of the unsupported features, many customers spent many, many months to do a conversion of an existing client-server project to get it to run over the internet. So with PowerServer 2021, we've rebuilt the product basically from the ground up. It's using a lot of technologies that Appeon has already brought to market over the years. So we brought you the .NET Data Store. We brought the SnapDevelop IDE. We brought the PowerScript migrator that converts data windows in SQL and PowerScript into C#. So it's using all of that stuff that we've been building and perfecting over the years, and we've added more to complete it so that you could take an entire PowerBuilder app, not just non-visual portion, and get that whole thing to run over the internet with a cloud-native architecture. So on the client side, we're using the same runtime DLLs as PowerBuilder client server. And because we use that same runtime DLL, because we don't translate to JavaScript anymore, we run PowerScript natively, we now basically do everything that your PowerBuilder client server app does today is supported. Currently, we don't have an IDE debugger. We didn't want to delay releasing PowerServer to market. That's coming. But you are able to use a PowerScript debugger to find flaws in your PowerScript logic. But if there's a problem outside of that, there's not an integrated debugger. The architecture is obviously cloud native. That's what we've been talking to you in this Keynote presentation all along about. And that means that it's API enabled. It should containerize. Of course, we have to use the cloud native version of .NET, the .NET Core. Currently, we're using 3.x. And this is an internet app, but it's not inside of the web browser. It's not HTML. It's a smart client. So many of you use apps on your phone. Those apps are not client server, and it's not HTML. And actually, you prefer to use that. It provides much more features, much more responsive user experience. But all of those apps on your phone are usually calling REST APIs over the internet. And so we're basically bringing that same architecture to the Windows operating system for PowerBuilder apps. And we've provided the utility PB Auto Build, as I mentioned earlier, so you can do continuous integration, continuous development. Because basically PowerServer 2021 can do everything PowerBuilder historically has been able to do, generally there's little to no code changes required. There's configuration needs to be done, but overall, we're seeing it just takes weeks to convert the applications over. Now, 2022 is coming out sometime next year, probably in the second half and early second half, I hope. We'll do everything we can to get this out to you sooner. And it's not going to be radically different in 2021, so I don't think you necessarily need to delay moving forward. You can get started on testing out PowerServer 2021 today, but it's going to offer a couple key advantages. One is there's an integrated debugger that will not only debug your PowerScript, but also the REST APIs. That application running in that cloud native format is debugging it end to end, all from within the PowerBuilder IDE. And the other key difference is that 2022 is going to use Microsoft's latest .NET Core 6.x that might offer some performance boost. Microsoft really improved the .NET Core's architecture going into the 6.x version. So hopefully you're excited and you're wondering, okay, great, a few weeks, I can handle that. How do I convert my app then? Well, in the PowerBuilder IDE, we've introduced a new project type, and all you need to do is insert that project type into your PowerBuilder application. And once you've done that, you're basically doing a lot of configuration. You're configuring this project object, and of course, you need to set up the environment. You need to set up a web server. You're going to need .NET. So there's going to be configurations you're going to have to do. There's going to be some remediation of code required. Maybe because you're using some unsupported features, like I said, that's extremely small, less than 1%. So probably most customers are not even using anything that's not supported. But the database connection for cloud application is different than client server. Your client app is not making that database connection. The web API that's on the server is talking to the database. So your database connection strings need to be adjusted, how that connection process works. But again, it's a minimal amount of work. It's not redoing your entire application. And obviously you need to test your app. And the REST APIs that are provided, you don't need to secure it right away to just see your app run on your local environment, but you definitely don't want to put this stuff out on the internet without securing those REST APIs. And we provide a number of built-in options to let you secure those with those industry standards that I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, such as OAuth and JWT. And then, of course, you eventually, when everything looks good in your development environment or on your testing or staging server, and then you finally push it out into production. So now let's take a look at what PowerBuilder 2021 looks like and see it in action. What you're looking at here is my Windows 10 developer machine. I have a few things installed. We have Microsoft IIS installed. We have PowerBuilder 2021 installed. And we also have Snap Develop 2021 installed. So what I'm going to do is take the demo application that ships with PowerBuilder, which is a traditional client-server on-premise app, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to convert that into a cloud-native application using the new features of PowerBuilder 2021. So first what we'll do is let's go ahead and run this application just as a traditional client-server app and just take a look what it looks like. This is a sales demo app. It's making use of the new UI modernization features we've added in PowerBuilder. So you have a ribbon bar and you have UI themes, which you essentially are using style sheets to render user interface, gives it a much more modern look without having to go through and do a lot of code changes. We have our beloved data window here with a master detail relationship. And we can go ahead and take a look at our customers. Under statistics, we've integrated Google Charts using the new Chromium web browser control. So at the top here, we have a data window that's pulling data. And then that data is being used to now plot the graphs in a Google chart. And we're going to take a look now in PowerBuilder how we take this client-server app and recompile it, not as client-server, as a cloud-native app. So the way we do that is we go to New, and we simply need to insert a new project object into the PBT. So here you can see we have some new project types. One of them is PowerServer. We select that. And what that's going to do is create this config screen where then we need to fill out a bunch of stuff, a lot more configuration than you would do for client server because the compilation of a cloud native app is definitely much more involved. but it's all configuration, not a ton of recoding. So to save time, I actually have one that I've already pre-populated and briefly run you through this. The general on the libraries tab should be very similar to client server, but there's a few new things added. One of them is this encrypt option where you can encrypt all the P code files. We use strong AES encryption so that your app cannot be reverse engineered or tampered with. Libraries are simply your library files, and external files are any files outside of the PowerBuilder runtime that your app needs. So that could be, for example, an INI file. It could be any external DLLs, OCX, OLE that you've added. Of course, images. A lot of apps are going to have some sort of images in there. And, I'm using the themes, so I include my theme folder that has the various themes. Now, once you've added these, you have the runtime tab. By default, it's going to include all of the runtimes, the base runtime files that you need. But if you're making use of some advanced features that not everybody uses, you can go ahead and add that. We don't include everything by default simply to minimize the footprint. So you'd go and check off the things you're using. So in our case, we're using the Chromium web browser control and we're using Ribbon Bar. So we check those options. We've integrated signing into the compile and deploy process, so you could have your application signed, and we strongly recommend doing that before your application goes live. But for a developer testing purpose and demo, it's not necessary to sign it. On the client deployment tab, we have options to deploy directly to the web server, which that's what I'm going to do. But you also have the option to create the client app in a zip file, which then you could hand that off to your network admin or whoever to go ahead and deploy that. Now, what's nice is the solution is designed to be smart. You have download options. You can have it download everything at startup, but to minimize download and so on for performance reasons, you can do downloading the files as necessary. In the run options tab, it's doing certain things about how the user would run or start your application. So you can specify desktop shortcut, start menu shortcut, uninstall. You could assign an icon. If you don't, by default, we'll do a default icon, the name of the shortcut, and so on. This is a very cool feature. We'll validate the application integrity before the app runs. So this ensures that before any executables are executed on the user's machine, it's making sure that those are in fact legit files, has not been tampered or hijacked. And since this is a cloud native app, it's not just a client app, there's actually a server piece, the REST APIs or web APIs. And so you simply need to do configuration, and the PowerServer compiler is going to take care of generating those C# REST APIs for you. So simple things like give it a solution name. We have built-in authentication services. So for REST APIs, you generally want to add authentication service so that not anybody can just access your REST APIs and get data out of your database. So we do that with popular token technologies. We support a number of them. Built-in options for JSON Web Tokens, OAuth. If you're running on AWS and want to use their Cognito authentication service, you can go ahead and do that as well. If you're using something from Azure or you don't want to use these built-in options, you can just do external, where then you can add your own authentication service to the C# project that's generated. So now that we've configured all these things, what we need to do is go through the build and deploy process. And what that's going to do is actually, it looks like it's one thing, but it's really two things. It's going to generate the client app, which is the portion that runs on the user's machine. It's also going to generate the C# REST APIs, and it's not going to compile the REST APIs. The client app is compiled, but the REST APIs is just pure C#. So let's go ahead and take a look at that C# that was generated. So if I open up Snap Develop, it's a C# IDE that's included with the PowerBuilder toolset. Excellent for developing web APIs. And so let's take a look at the anatomy of this C# project that's generated. So the first things first, you have your models. So these are basically the data window data objects, and we translate these into standard POCO or C# models, and this is the definition of data windows. Now, dynamic data windows is also supported. If you have any static data windows, this is how PowerServer deals with it. It translates it into a static model. And also all of the embedded SQL from your application is pulled out in the server side. So the SQL is no longer in the client app, even though as a developer, you don't need to worry what goes where. It's all taken care of for you. So you just have your embedded SQL in your app as normal, and PowerServer takes care of pulling that out, putting in the C# REST API. Now let's go ahead. We have our server API project that's also generated a number of config files. So this configuration is pulled from the process in the PowerBuilder IDE. When we configure the web API, is pull that information in. But if you want to modify that, you can. And we have our authentication. So if you're using one of the built-in options, it'd be here, or you could, code your own, extend it. And PowerServer has a number of API interfaces that allows you to manipulate that. You could do it from PowerBuilder, you could do it from outside of PowerBuilder. So you could have another application that's manipulating these REST APIs. And we've integrated Swagger so that you could easily see, what those APIs are, what they do, how to call them, and so on. And last but not least, we've integrated a unit testing project. So we use XUnit, and that's all integrated into here and lets you, automate the unit test of your REST APIs without having to code it yourself. It's all done for you. Now, this C# project does need to be compiled, and the way you can do that is you simply go here and go to publish, and we give you a number of options. You could publish your REST APIs directly to the web server using a web deploy. This would be good, for example, if you have access to that web server. If you don't have access to the web server, for example, maybe it's a production server that you can't access, well, then you could simply compile these and save it to your disk, and then you would just pass off those files. So there's not a complicated install or deploy process. It's simply copying the compiled result over. This is all using .NET Core, so these are designed to be self-contained. It's containing the .NET framework and everything it needs in that package. So to run completely independently, you don't even have to run it on IIS because it's using .NET Core. We could use Kestrel, which is the cross OS server, supports Linux as well. And we've also integrated Docker. That's a nice thing, a Snap Develop IDE. If you want to take your REST API project and put it in a Docker container, you could do that and simply do the config and go through with the Docker deploy. So another nice thing we've done is, instead of having to use Snap Develop to simply compile the web APIs and just test your app, we've integrated a C# compiler into the PowerBuilder IDE. So we could just click compile and run and click OK. And what that's going to do is compile the C# without having to go and Snap Develop and do a more sophisticated deploy. That is what you would do if you want to put this out in production, or if you're trying to run on Docker container. But for the purpose of testing on my development environment, I'm just going to fire up Kestrel here, compile the C# APIs, and you can see that the .NET server is running. My APIs are running. I'm using my developer license that comes included with the PowerBuilder subscription. There's nothing more to buy to do simply development. It's only if you're going into production, then you might need to get a production license. So our Kestrel is running. I'm going to move this aside, okay? And what we're going to do now is switch gears and take a look at, from the app user's perspective, what is their experience like? Well, let's take a clean machine. They have no app installed yet. They're going to open up a browser, okay? And what they're going to do is simply type in a URL to your app, or there's a link that they click on. And the first time they're running it, they don't have the launcher. The launcher is the thing that manages installing the app, verifying its integrity, doing incremental updates and so on. And so that launcher facilitates that. It's very small, several megabytes only. Does not require elevated privileges at all. So even on a very high security environment, your users should be able to, install the launcher. So we've downloaded a launcher. I click it to install it. And this launcher is also available as an MSI, and you could even do a silent install of it if you wanted to. So there's many different ways to get this launcher onto the user's machine. Now, once the launcher is installed, it's going to automatically try to load the URL of that app. Now, this is not running in the browser. As you can see in the icon in my taskbar, this is running outside of the browser as a standalone cloud application. It's an internet connected app. So let me go ahead and just show you that. You can see here a shortcut has been created in the start menu. If we go here, we also have the shortcut and the uninstall if we want to remove it. So if the user wants, they could keep starting the application every time through, a URL. It's no problem. And you can see there was no need to install and download a launcher again. It's a one-time thing. But a lot of users probably would just like to use the shortcuts, but this is all up to you. We can configure in the project whether to have a shortcut or not have a shortcut. This is makes it feel almost like it's still a real desktop app, but it's obviously cloud native. So the app is going to work exactly the same, and it's going to have all of the same features because PowerServer basically supports everything that PowerBuilder can do in client server as well. So you don't need to dumb down your application, and we can go ahead and take a look. It looks the same, works the same, and we can take a look at the statistics here. We'll go look at that Google Charts. So here we'll retrieve the data into our data window, and then the Google Charts drawn. Now let's go ahead and take a look at making a change to our application. So I'm going to close all this stuff, open up PowerBuilder. Let's go ahead and do, something simple. Let me find here. We'll go to this user object, and let's just go ahead and add a button here. I'll put it right there. All right. Click Save. Close it. We need to open up our project object again to do a build. Okay, it's all done. So what we do now is we need to fire up our web APIs again. So I don't need to go to Snap Develop. I can just do everything from PowerBuilder IDE. Going to Snap Develop was just to show you that you can get into that C# code and do really advanced things. You don't have to do that to simply get your app converted and do unit testing in your local environment. So the web APIs are running again and they're compiled. And now let's switch gears back again to the app user. What do? They come to work the next day, click on the icon, start the app. The app is scanning the web server and it's updating what has changed. So what has changed? This one window. And now the user got the update. Another thing I like to show you is, this stuff looks so slick, you might think it's client server, but it's not. As we're doing things here, you can see the REST APIs are changing, So any data access, no matter it's executing a line of embedded SQL, doing a data window retrieve, data window update, the client app does not have any database drivers or any database configuration. It's simply making an HTTP call to industry standard REST APIs, which then brings back the data in JSON format to here. All right, I hope this past hour has been exciting or at least interesting for you. You've heard me talk a lot. You've seen a demo. We all know demos usually look good. But I think what's really important is how does this cloud native stuff, how does PowerServer work in real life, on real life complex applications that have been developed over many, many years. And today, during our keynote sessions, you're gonna hear from customers. You're going to hear from United Insurance that talks about their insurance application. You're going to hear from another customer in Asia that has an ERP system. I'll let them tell you what PowerServer is really like, and rather than you take my word for it. So thanks very much for your interest and attention in our keynote presentation, and hope you enjoy the rest of Elevate 2021.
Hello, my name is Mark Wenzel. I work for United Insurance Group. I've been asked to share our experience with moving our application to the cloud in less than 2 weeks. Just a little bit of information about myself. I've been using PowerBuilder since approximately PowerBuilder 5 and use other products from Appeon as well. The company I work for is United Insurance Group. They started in 1998 with automobile insurance in Utah. Since 1998, UIG has grown to $125 million in written premium. Our insurance products have expanded to include the list of coverages you see below. All of our insurance products are distributed by more than 450 insurance agencies. Our main software application is called InsurePass. What is InsurePass? It is insurance paperless automated system. It was built in PowerBuilder 4 beginning in 1996. InsurePass is the main software for quoting, servicing, and reporting insurance policies we issue. All transactions relating to our insurance policies take place in InsurePass. This is a critical system for our company. Along with standard create, retrieve, update, and delete functionality, our InsurePass has the need to communicate with external entities to gather data as policies are issued and serviced. Some of that information we gather is MVR, Clue, and Carfax data and reports. We also communicate with credit bureaus, ISO claim data, and lien holder notifications. We also interact with Authorize.net, a credit card merchant who handles all of our credit card transactions, all through web services. Being that we are paperless, we heavily use PDF generation. We rely on third-party DLL at the time to combine the multiple PDF documents that are generated into a single document for our policyholders. Some more information about our application. We currently have over 170 separate databases used to isolate the insurance policy information from agent to agent. With that many databases, we use DB Remote to synchronize with the main office servers here. Within the application, we connect and disconnect to multiple databases dynamically depending on the user logged in and their privileges and authorities. The InsurePass application is a big application. It has over 6,700 PowerBuilder objects. Here's kind of a breakdown of the many data windows and functions that we use and the number of windows that are within our application. This summer, we were approached by our business partner in California, CSC, who we've been in business with for over 15 years. They wanted to use the automobile component of InsurePass for a new insurance product that they had in mind in California. As we worked with them and analyzed what needed to be done, we found there were 3 major hurdles that we had to face. One was to implement the new rules for the state of California laws. Previously in Utah and Arizona, rules were pretty similar, so it was easy to go back and forth in making new applications. Then the second major hurdle was finding a way to distribute the new application to new users in California. In Utah and Arizona, the agencies we knew well, we had good, strong working relationship, and it was easy for us to install the traditional client server software on their servers. We had a good presence there with them and able to continue to use the DB Remote to synchronize with our main office. In California, there are over 280 new agency offices, of course with multiple users, which we have no previous relationship with, and so it became hard to know how to distribute this since we don't have a UIG presence. Then the other major hurdle we had was the new application required to be in production within 2 months. There was really no time for us to worry about learning new technologies and distributing this application. Why we chose PowerServer 2021. It has enabled us to use existing PowerBuilder code to extract and modify the automobile insurance component from InsurePass to a new application called InsurePass CSE. We were able to use the same or similar user interface, user experience that existed in the client server version in our previous InsurePass application using PowerServer. This was important as the CSE staff would be responsible for training the new agents, but also they would be the first line of support as these new users had questions. The other thing on PowerServer 2020 allowed us was there's no need to learn new programming skills. We were able to focus more on implementing the new business rules. We were able to use the existing knowledge we had of IIS to distribute the PowerServer application to the users in California. What are some of the results we found using PowerServer 2021? We were able to quickly turn around and meet the timeline of the project. The InsurePass CSE software was ready in less than 2 months. In fact, we were able to publish a working PowerServer 2021 version of InsurePass less than 2 weeks after the PowerBuilder coding was complete. It solved our deployment issues. All we needed to do was share a URL generated within the PowerServer application project to the agents, and as they use this URL, it would install the PowerServer web app on their side. We were also able to discard the use of third-party DLLs that we had been using that needed to be registered in the traditional client-server application. A couple of those that we removed were PDF split merge and Chillcat for the different services they helped us with. We found that we could easily rewrite that functionality included in objects that were in PowerBuilder 2021. Within the PowerServer deployment app, there's the ability to build and deploy the PowerServer project. And we found this a valuable tool. As we use it, it identified objects needing to be modified or removed, which reduced the size of our application, which is important as we were sending this over HTTPS protocol. Let me show you the PowerServer version of our application. As we come here to the desktop, this icon here looks just much like the traditional client server icon, but as we click on it, you'll see the web app start up, and I can log in as a user, and just like the traditional client server app, we have a window with menu items and different quick links here. I want to show a couple of the main windows that are used just to show you the power of PowerServer and what it's done to be able to do with our powerful application. As agents will come in, they'll be able to pull up a policy that they service, and with that they can, as they search, they'll find a list of application or policies here, and opens up to the first main window. And we realize that there is a lot of information on that, but that was done on purpose. The users found that they liked having the information there present instead of having to go through and click next and next and next, and how you might do in a different environment. I'd like to show you how this screen works when we're adding a vehicle, because it shows some of the functionality that takes place. So as I enter a VIN number here, you'll see that how it pulled up the information that it's a 2003 Chrysler Town Country. The user is able to select the usage of the vehicle, if there's any custom equipment, like this is a truck or a van, kind of a trailer. Additional interest, if there's a lien holder. One of the things that we use with rating is how many miles are driven annually. So with this, the agent can come in here, and with the information they have from the car, they can put what would be the current odometer reading. And here, if they indicate if the vehicle has been owned for more than 12 months, it allows the agent to do this option here, confirm mileage, which is a web service call out to Carfax. And as you can see quickly through that web service, it pulled back the information that Carfax has and how recent that information came back. And so you can make those changes. With this, then we can make some additional changes down here on the drivers. With drivers, you can see maybe violations or issues they've had. In this window, there's the option to get MVR reports or get the clue reports right here. But it also allows the agent to add violations manually. These are the list of all the different violations that are nationally known. And this is a very long and complex list, and you can see how quickly it was pulled up by this version of the application. The agent can quickly select this and then put in a violation date of when it might have occurred, and with that they can do that real quick and add those points. And once that's done, the agent can save these changes to the policy, and quickly it'll be updated. It allows us to quickly print out a payment schedule because that will change. But I wanted to also quickly show you the PDF generation. We allow the agent to come in here and make adjustments and then print off those adjustments for the policyholder. And with that, they can click the Save to PDF button, which will take the various PDF forms that are being generated right now, and it will combine them into one. And if they save that here to the desktop, you can see real quickly how those forms are generated, and the multiple documents are now here all in one document. Nice and convenient for the agent and the policyholder. See their declaration page and some of the information that is required, that payment schedule, different insurance information for their vehicles as they need to present it. And so this just shows how robust PowerServer is to maintain the client-server appearance and usage, as this is now an application on the cloud. Thank you for your time today and for the opportunity to show the power and the ability of PowerServer 2021.
Hello everyone, I'm glad to see so many of you online for Animate 2021. On behalf of the Appeon R&D team, today I would like to brief you on the progress and the prospects of the development of PowerBuilder. As you may expect, I have a disclaimer since I'm talking about our future plans. The roadmap I will present today are roughly our goals for the coming years. But of course, plans may change along the way for a variety of reasons, some of which may be beyond our control. Although generally speaking, since Appeon took over PowerBuilder in 2016, we have been delivering according to our planned roadmap quite well. Highlights of the past year. Ever since its existence, PowerBuilder has enjoyed the reputation of being a great R&D development tool for building business applications. It's Appion's job to continue evolving PowerBuilder to bring the same productivity for today's IT stack. With that said, I want to highlight some of the key evolutions we have made to PowerBuilder this past year. PowerServer deployment. PowerScript projects can be automatically deployed to the cloud using the new PowerServer deployment method. These apps have standard cloud-native architecture running on .NET Framework and adhere to industry best practices for security. PowerBuilder shields you from the complexity of cloud app development, so it remains just as easy and productive as using older versions of PowerBuilder. If you want to continue with client-server architecture, we have greatly improved the deployment of these project types with PowerClient. PowerClient synchronizes and automates the distribution and updates of your client-server apps. All the application files are hosted on a web server, installed to end users with all required external files and runtime, and then synchronized automatically with changes. The PowerBuilder IDE and runtime have been decoupled. This means that now you can update the PowerBuilder IDE to the latest and greatest, but maintain projects for multiple runtime versions from a single up-to-date IDE. No longer is upgrading to the PowerBuilder IDE a daunting migration task of your source code, and you can easily revert back to an older version of the runtime if need be. REST API development using data window technology, .NET Data Store, has been greatly enhanced to support better automated conversion of existing business logic, asynchronous programming, and enhanced JSON parsing and generation. Recent product releases. In January this year, we delivered PowerBuilder InfoMaker 2019 R3. It is a long-term support version. Shortly after, in February, the preview of PowerBuilder 2021 was started. And then, at the end of April, the 2021 beta was conducted. The major release of PowerBuilder InfoMaker 2021 came out on August 6. Between the main releases, MRs for 2017 R3, 2019 R3, and the 2021 have been arranged based upon customers' needs and issues. With PowerServer, we had an annual MR release for the long-term support version PowerServer 2020 in April. Then, the major release of PowerServer 2021 came out on August 6. We will continue maintaining PowerServer 2020, but at the same time, PowerServer 2021 gets you off of legacy web architecture and onto a cloud-native architecture. As explained last year, we do not plan to deliver revisions for version 2021, and will go straight to another major release, because this upcoming release will be a significant change compared to 2021. So next year, you should expect version 2022 rather than a revision of 2021. And then we resume doing revisions, at least a couple, but possibly more. As before, revisions aim to deliver some minor new features and polish existing features of the major version until we arrive to a long-term support revision. As before, we will deliver revisions in agile 6 to 12 month release cycles. After the LTS revision will be the next major version. But we can't say right now if it will be PB 2024 or 2025, because the release date is still yet to be determined. What I can say with fairly high confidence is that the next major version after 2022 will feature a new modern code editor. Because developer productivity is important to PowerBuilder's continued success. Note that starting from version 2021, the release schedule of PowerServer will stay in sync with that of PowerBuilder to ensure that the deployment of cloud-native apps stay in sync with the latest PowerBuilder client-server features. Roadmap focus for the next 2 to 3 major versions. Those of you that have been following our roadmap for last several years know that we have heavily prioritized cloud, from consumption and creation of REST APIs to the newly revamped PowerServer 2021. Because up until recently, PowerBuilder was only a client-server development tool. But as we move forward, we will be reprioritizing things to put greater focus on core features, UI modernization, and dev productivity. Of course, cloud technology is surely to evolve, so we will keep cloud as one of our 4 roadmap focus areas. So now, let's drill down a little deeper into each of these focus areas and what they really mean. Core features are about the PowerBuilder runtime. This now becomes a top focus. We always know the sustainability, stability, and security of PowerBuilder applications are very critical to our customers. Besides, it's important to add more features for the runtime applications that will benefit both the PowerBuilder developers and the end users that daily work on the applications. And because cloud apps share the same runtime as client-server apps, so improving the runtime is also naturally aligned with our cloud direction. It is a win-win no matter you want to use PowerBuilder to develop client-server projects or cloud-native projects. Dev productivity is essentially about improving the IDE. Although we have made some changes in each major version since we took over PowerBuilder, we recognize there is still much work to do. The engineering team is starting to put emphasis on modernizing the IDE itself. We have already introduced a few major features for modern UI enhancements, such as codeless UI modernization using UI themes and the new ribbon bar control. We do our best to come up with features that are low effort to implement and can have big impact on the UI, UX of your apps. Introducing another type of document interface and improving graphing capability of data windows are just a couple of examples of what we have planned. Cloud becomes the last in the list, not because it is not important. In fact, majority of our customers say they eventually plan to go to the cloud. So Appeon has invested heavily these past years to rebuild PowerServer from the ground up with cloud-native architecture. Since the 2021 version of PowerServer is the first release with this new architecture, there are more features we need to add and polishing we need to do in the 2022 version, which I will outline today in the product roadmap. Focus number 1, core features. The value of PowerBuilder lies in the client that it develops, which is shared by both client-server and the cloud-native application. It is now our top focus to enhance the core features of the client to help ensure PowerBuilder continues to be a great choice for building the client, no matter of the architecture type. Here I list out our plan on core features in 5 main categories. Update. As a general rule, our team is committed to add support for new releases of third-party software in the new major version or revision of PowerBuilder. Specifically, the latest Windows OS, SQL Server, Oracle, SQL Anywhere, web browsers, and .NET will be compatible with our new releases. Security. With the introduction of the REST and HTTP client, and also the PowerServer deployment method, it is now quite common for PowerBuilder apps to communicate over HTTP protocol. HTTPS is essential for securing the communication between the client and the server, so we think it is important to support the latest HTTP and security protocols, HTTP2 and TLS 1.3. Integration. Our team has been keen on enhancing the integration of PowerBuilder applications with other systems and services. We have worked out a main set of integration features: HTTP client, REST client, calling C# assemblies from PowerScript. These features are increasingly being used by PowerBuilder developers. In the coming version, we plan to further expand the implementation scope of the features. A native email client will be available for direct connection to mail server for email services. A FTP client object will make it possible to directly send and receive files over FTP, FTPS from the client. When loading functions from C# assembly, the function may use a generic type, delegate, or class as parameter or return value. REST client and HTTP client will support two-way authentication. That is, the client accesses the server with anonymous certificate or a certificate at the client. Data window and control. We know how important data windows and controls are in every client. So there are a number of enhancements planned for data windows and controls. For drop-down data windows, you will be able to filter search as you type. The data window save as function will make it possible to directly save the report format to a Microsoft Excel file. Native PDF printing will be further enhanced, and we will add a few non-requested features such as PDF split and PDF merge. We have plans to support more features of rich text, which will benefit both the rich text data windows as well as rich text control. Further miscellaneous data window enhancements are being considered and will be gradually rolled out. Performance. Two big features we have planned should improve the performance of existing applications. First, asynchronous functionality. It will be possible to write asynchronous code. This makes the UI/UX of your app much more responsive. Second, optimization of the 64-bit runtime. We think it important to fully apply the advantage of 64-bit computing and memory handling to enhance the 64-bit application runtime performance. Again, I just want to remind you all that core features benefit all PowerBuilder project types, no matter traditional client-server, Power Client, or PowerServer. So, more core features should hopefully be exciting for everybody. Focus number 2, dev productivity. We hear complaints that the PowerBuilder IDE is outdated, which we totally understand. As I mentioned, we are committed to make major changes in this area in the coming years. IDE interface. We are still continuing to make big bang for the bug adjustments to IDE based on customer feedbacks until we deliver a new modern IDE experience. Some things we have done are resizing windows, dialogues, and adding more search functions to assist developers to navigate in the IDE. We will be kicking off the shift to a modern IDE with a new tab interface in PowerBuilder 2022. I think a lot of our customers will really appreciate this. Previously, if there were multiple painters open in the IDE, you could only switch between the painters by selecting the correct one from the Windows drop-down menu. Modern IDEs have now abandoned this way. Switching between tabs is more convenient and seamless, which you can experience for yourself in PowerBuilder 2022. The next major shift to a modern IDE will be an entirely new code editor, which we plan to introduce in the next major version after version 2022. The new code editor will support the things you typically see in modern IDEs, such as collapsible code blocks, code assistance, code navigation, code refactoring, etc. Build and compile. We will make it possible to specify the PowerBuilder runtime version to use for each individual application, rather than currently in 2021, it is performed at an IDE level. You will have more flexibility for developing and building applications. Currently, with the Git SVN source control in PowerBuilder, developers must push peoples to the repository at least once. But peoples are binary files that cannot be effectively version controlled by Git SVN. This has caused a number of problems, such as unnecessary conflicts, error in branching or updating, etc. Version 2022 will fix this problem. Users only need to upload the source code, no peoples, to the source control server, because the PowerBuilder IDE can now automatically generate the necessary peoples from the downloaded source code. PowerScript debugging. Debugging is a critical step in application development, so we are eager to close the main two gaps between what IDE can develop and what the debugger can support, which are 64-bit debugging and installable cloud app debugging. Both the 64-bit debugging and installable cloud app debugging will still be PowerScript debugging in essence, and the user experience of running the debugging will be very similar to the debugging for the 32-bit client-server applications. C# debugging. The C# IDE snap-develop already contains the core IDE features for developing, analyzing, debugging, and deploying REST API projects. Since the REST APIs can be deployed to a variety of environments and technologies, we plan to support debugging APIs running on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, or running in a Docker container. Focus number 3, modern UI. What we did for application UI in the past is to bring necessary new tools and options that can be adopted by existing PowerBuilder applications with relatively low effort. For example, Windows 10 styles can be enabled through simple configuration change of the UI themes rather than extensive recoding. Web browser and text control are new drag-and-drop controls that are greatly enhanced compared to the old Internet Explorer and rich text controls. Applications can switch to work in the latest accessibility framework, Microsoft UI Automation Accessibility, without any code changes. We plan to add more features that can assist PowerBuilder developers to modernize the UI, UX of PowerBuilder applications with relatively no effort. Tabbed Document Interface. This was a request from the PowerBuilder community site, and we listened. You will have the choice of traditional MDI or through configuration settings, display the multiple windows in a tabbed view. Graph Data Window. Although you can use the web browser control to integrate JavaScript charting solutions such as Apache eCharts, we know how much PowerBuilder developers love the data window. So we intend to provide native graph data window options that support modern graph styles like what you would find in Apache eCharts. At the same time, our team will listen to customer feedback and try to do more UI UX features, just like we have listened about tabbed document interface and graph data windows. While PowerBuilder is a fantastic tool for building clients for the Windows OS, we do see some customers have the need to develop UI for non-Windows OS, such as Mac OS, iOS, and Android. So to make the bundle of tools that come with PowerBuilder more comprehensive, we plan to enhance Snap Develop with other UI technologies. Support various HTML UI technologies, including HTML and CSS, JavaScript, and TypeScript. Support leading HTML UI frameworks, including React, Angular, and Vue. Support the development, compilation, and deployment of Razor pages in ASP.NET Core. Support developing mobile clients using no-code. Focus number 4, Cloud. Today, the PowerServer deployment method in PowerBuilder 2021 already covers the core set of features needed for achieving our cloud goal through a simple and automatic way. Convert. After the PowerServer conversion, the app still has the Windows native client, while its data access logic is converted into industry standard REST APIs running on .NET. Develop. Good news is that you can still develop in the same productive way you've been used to, visually in the PowerBuilder IDE using PowerScript and the data windows. Build and deploy. Continuous integration can be implemented with the new PB Auto-Build utility, which provides more complete feature set than Orca, has no dependency on PB IDE, and integrates with Jenkins. In terms of deployment, you can easily deploy to IIS, Castro, Docker, and Kubernetes. As I mentioned earlier, this PowerServer was rebuilt from the ground up with a cloud-native architecture. Since this was a massive effort, there were some important features that did not make it in the first release. We are prioritizing to close the gap with PowerServer 2022, as well as polish the product based on customer feedback. Specifically, for PowerServer 2022, we will take these enhancing and strengthening measures. Boost performance noticeably by leveraging HTTP2, upgrading to .NET 6, grouping REST API calls, etc. Most of these features will not require any code changes, and when code changes are required, it will not be extensive. Optimizing the installation and running of Cloud App Launcher so that it works even more seamlessly. Enhancing the UFA report to better assist you to tackle any unsupported features in your project. It is important to note we are doing this for the sake of polishing the product, since most customers do not heavily rely on this feature. The reason is the number of unsupported features is very small and usually not heavily used, so most customers should not encounter many unsupported features. Debugging is a critical step in the development of applications. We will make it possible to debug PowerServer projects from within the PowerBuilder IDE in similar manner as debugging client-server projects. While Appeon is enhancing the integration between PowerBuilder applications and REST APIs, we want to ensure that PowerBuilder developers can share valuable business logic with other applications and systems. Since we have standardized on .NET for REST APIs, so we provide a C# IDE in the PowerBuilder product bundle called SnapDevelop. You may be asking yourself, why use SnapDevelop instead of another C# IDE, such as Visual Studio? With SnapDevelop, you can develop REST APIs much faster because you can directly generate .NET data store models from PowerBuilder data windows. And the C# programming is based on data window concepts. More development functions are planned, such as building scalable microservices that use gRPC for communication, support direct connection with cloud relational DB services, developing Node.js applications. Regarding deployment options of the REST APIs, it is already quite easy to deploy to IIS, Castro, and Docker. We will be enhancing SnapDevelop to make it easy to also deploy to Kubernetes. In October, we conducted a survey collecting feedback on users' experiences and expectations of PowerBuilder. Here I'd like to share with you some statistics that you may find of interest. What's the newest version of PowerBuilder you have tried? 48.7% of respondents tried PowerBuilder 2019 R2 or R3, and 26.7% of respondents have tried PowerBuilder 2021. These numbers tell us that 75.4% of respondents have keen interest in how Appeon has been evolving PowerBuilder recently. How would you rate your general satisfaction level with the newest version of PowerBuilder you tried? 76.4% of the respondents are satisfied or very satisfied. 5.9% are not much satisfied. This will drive us to keep doing our best and bring more useful features to PowerBuilder. We also want to understand users' view of choosing the new PowerServer deployment as their cloud solution. 80.3% wants to use PowerServer or stay in client server. Only 19.7% are not satisfied with the current PowerServer. But we believe about half of these will be satisfied with the future versions of PowerServer as we continue improving it. The most liked features we planned in the PowerBuilder roadmap include new code editor, tabbed interface, 64-bit debugging, and PowerServer performance enhancement. The collaboration between our customers and our product management team is critical for the continued growth of PowerBuilder. Our team has been very appreciative of the support and ideas from the whole PowerBuilder community. There has been active participation in the beta programs. These feedbacks play an important role in shaping each major release to meet the needs of real-life projects. The community site has always been a valuable channel for collaboration. We actively monitor the posts on the site and do our best to incorporate what we see into our product plans. At least every 12 months, we conduct surveys to gather feedback from customers on their current pain points and feature requests. We incorporate open-ended questions and carefully read each single response. You may not know this, but our product management team actively works with our support team to not just fix bugs, but identify ways we can improve the product. We have monthly meetings to identify trends of enhancements that would increase your satisfaction with PowerBuilder. As always, you can directly communicate with our product management team and share your feedback directly by sending emails to product@appeon.com. Okay, I think that's a lot of information for you to digest and hope you like our plans. Thank you very much for your support to give PowerBuilder a long and bright future. Now, I'd like to hand you over to Chris, who is going to give you a preview of some of the new features of PowerBuilder 2022.
Thanks, Julie, for that nice introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Pollock, Director of Developer Relations here at Appeon. Welcome to Elevate 2021 and my keynote presentation, a sneak peek at PowerBuilder and PowerServer new features for version 2022. Again, this is an early sneak peek. There'll be more features coming, but here's something that we can actually show you today that's working. So what am I going to cover? PowerBuilder 2022, of course. A tabbed interface. This is very common now in Microsoft Office and, for example, even in the new Windows 11 File Manager. Source code control enhancements, such as the inclusion or exclusion of PowerBuilder libraries. IDE enhancements such as the ability to resize other system response dialogues. You can actually filter. For example, in the Object Painter, when you do a save as, I can actually look for certain PowerBuilder libraries. This is great when your project contains hundreds of PowerBuilder libraries. Expressions. Yes, in the tree view search dialog, you can actually do an expression and search for things in the system tree view of the IDE. And jump. Here's one that's been asked for a while. You can highlight a piece of code that refers to another object and then have the script painter automatically take you there. For PowerServer 2022, here's the big one. Yep, you got it. Application debugging, real-time debugging right from the PowerServer project. I can see already a lot of people are getting excited on this one. And remember, the product roadmap, which is at appeon/developers/roadmap, is always being updated. So please visit this URL often to find out what's new and exciting coming down the line in a new version near you. So let's look at PowerBuilder 2022 features. In specific, the tab interface. It's more modern and effective interface for developers. It makes it easier to view and switch between different painters that are open using tabs. Now, so let's have a look and see what this new user interface looks like. So here you have the PowerBuilder IDE open. I've opened a couple of objects, a window, a user object, and a data window. Notice that you actually see them here as tab pages across the top. And if you move the mouse and the hover text, it actually gives you a description of what you're looking at. You also have a new drop down here on the right-hand side. It allows you to actually see what's going on. And again, you have hover text, which allows you to see exactly what that particular object is and where it comes from and what it's actually doing. I was really worried when I first saw this because a lot of times you want to open up two windows or two data windows and you want to compare one script to the other script. So I thought, oh, gee, this tabbed interface doesn't allow multiple document interface where you can actually tile and cascade and actually vertically and horizontally manage those particular painters. But guess what? The tabbed interface all it does as well. So you can see here, you can do a vertical, you can do a horizontal tab, you can cascade it, or you can go back to the original full screen lookup. So it allows you now to alleviate that worry that you'll be able to actually compare two scripts or two data windows or two user objects and see, for example, if they're very similar, what the differences are by visually having a look at it. So that feature is still here in the new tabbed interface. You don't have to worry about it. Notice also in the window pull down, you see the actual tabs being displayed as well here in the drop down. So everything looks nice and usable, easy to navigate, and move back and forth very easily. For example, holding the control key down and using the tab, then we can also just tab through these. Notice if I use the right-hand mouse button on one of these tabs as well, I can close the current one, everything to the left, everything to the right, everything but this tab, and of course close all tabs. So let's look at some more features. Source code control. Auto-compilation of PowerBuilder libraries means that developers no longer need to upload their PowerBuilder libraries to the source code repository. When an object source is downloaded from the source code control to the PowerBuilder IDE, the PowerBuilder libraries will be auto-compiled from the source. So what are the benefits? It increases the efficiency of dealing with source code management software interactions. It can help to avoid problems caused by various PowerBuilder libraries that are also being downloaded and synchronized at that time. And it helps to reduce unnecessary conflicts, for example, errors in branching or updating the source code repository from your PowerBuilder libraries within your workspace. So let's have a look at that in detail. So let's have a look at the sales demo application within the sales demo workspace. You notice that this one is not attached to source code control. So I'm going to use the right-hand mouse button here on the workspace. I'm going to say add to source control. We're going to choose Git, for example, or I could choose SVN. I connect to the repository. It's now going to scan my application and PowerBuilder libraries. Notice that we have a new add to source control dialog. But what's interesting here in the tree view, notice there are no PowerBuilder libraries. So all the objects have been scanned in the existing libraries, and here's a list of just the object source within those libraries that's going to be actually uploaded to the source code manager repository. So once everything's been added to the repository, you can see here, for example, that there is a green dot saying that the source code manager is now in control, for example, of the data window D address. But notice, however, if I select a PowerBuilder library and I use the right-hand mouse button, this is the point where I can actually force the upload of a PowerBuilder library. The default of the actual interaction between the IDE and the source code manager is not to actually upload the libraries. However, I like this as even in older versions of PowerBuilder. I used to upload the PowerBuilder libraries when I was doing an actual release. That way, the source code and a copy of the PowerBuilder library is sitting there in the repository as I get to a particular build, which I'm actually now deploying into production. But now the developer has control of when that PowerBuilder library gets updated by using the right-hand mouse button, if and only if they need to. So miscellaneous enhancements within the PowerBuilder IDE. The capability here now to resize, for example, the Quick Watch dialog in the debugger, insert object within the window painter, update properties within the data window, and retrieval arguments. And also to filter. For example, on the object painter, as I mentioned earlier, when you do a save as, you can actually filter down the list of your PowerBuilder libraries, make it much easier to find when you have, again, tens or hundreds of PowerBuilder libraries in your application workspace. And then an expression search. And that can be done with the actual search dialog on the system tree. And of course, then the ability to jump from one PowerBuilder script to another PowerBuilder script in a different object. So very productive for the PowerBuilder developer. So let's look at a demo of those features in action. So returning back to the IDE, let's go and debug this application. Here we are at a breakpoint, and you can see here, for example, if we wanted to add a quick watch. Notice that this dialog here is totally resizable. That was not capable in PowerBuilder 2019 or 2021. Moving over to the window painter, let's insert, for example, a user object. And here you can see the resizable dialog again for inserting a user object. So this makes it a lot easier to actually see and walk through a large list. Moving over now to the data window, let's have a look at the update properties. And notice here, now the update properties dialog is now resizable as well, which is not true, again, in the earlier versions of Appeon PowerBuilder. In the existing data window, let's have a look at the retrieval arguments. Notice here in the retrieval argument dialog, I can actually scroll through it by actually using the wheel. So this is something new. The dialog not only is resizable, but now you can actually use the wheel to scroll through the arguments, which you could do neither of them in the previous version. Returning to the main data window painter, let's do a file save as. And here you can actually see this is a standard dialog. Looks a little bit bigger. It is resizable, of course, which is nice. But we also have this new filter. For example, I can actually type in P and just get a list of the libraries that begin with P or have a P in it. If I want, I can type in more of a fragment of a name and then narrow it right down to the person library where I want to store it. So this is a lot handier again when you're going through an application that has tens of dozens or hundreds of PowerBuilder libraries. So again, returning to the main IDE, let's have a look at the system tree on the left-hand side. Use the right-hand mouse button, and we'll actually do a search. Notice we have a new checkbox here, regular expression. So let's say, for example, I was looking for U underscore in the old search. And we see here that we actually found 150 matches of any object that had U underscore in it. But let's do that again. This time I'm going to type in caret U underscore, which says to the search, this is an expression, only start looking for U underscore at the beginning. Notice this time we only found 88 matches of objects or scripts that begin with the actual U underscore word. If the U underscore appeared anywhere else in the name, it's ignored. So that's just one example of an expression that you can add in the search. So let's have a look at the jump feature. Here I'm in the application object in the actual open of the application object event script. You can see there we're opening a window called wmain. Well, if I just double click that to highlight it, use the right hand mouse button and then select jump, you can see here now that it actually goes to the open event of that particular window. And we can actually see the layout, which is basically an empty ancestor window. But we can easily go through here, the event list and anything else, but I didn't have to know where to find it. The IDE automatically knew which PowerBuilder library it was, loaded it, and then put me in the first script so I can continue having a look at what's going on when I say open that particular window. If I go to another open, for example, and there was another user object or a window or whatever, then I could just highlight that and then use the right hand mouse button and select jump. In this case, I can even jump to a method or an event. Much more productive for the PowerBuilder programmer. And that's one of the things that we're focusing on here for PowerBuilder 2022 to improve the overall developer productivity. So let's have a look at PowerServer 2022 features. The real big one, debugging a PowerServer project. That is actually a compiled application ready for deployment from the web server. So debugging of a PowerServer project is now conducted based on compiled PBDs. So what does that mean? It means that the debugging project candidate must already be deployed. In other words, it must reside on your local web server. And the PBDs have already been created by scanning your existing PowerBuilder libraries. So you have to basically do a build and deploy from the PowerServer project first. Then, of course, the application executable and the Cloud App Launcher utility must already be downloaded to the current machine. So you basically have to have made sure that you've installed the Cloud App Launcher and the application once on the current machine through the web browser URL. Then you can use the shortcut. Or, of course, you'll be able to now use the debugger right from the IDE. So when debugging is started, the IDE will then see that the code is executed right within the IDE. So you're using the same debugger, you have the same features that you're used to in a native client-server application. It's just that the application is now remote to the IDE. The debugging experience is the same, so there's no learning curve for the existing PowerBuilder programmer. Again, that productivity bonus that we're getting here in 2022. And then code executed within the installable Cloud App, the IDE is communicating back and forth, sending requests and getting responses from the application, and showing that information to you in the actual real-time debugger. So let's have an actual demo. So the first thing you need to do is open your PowerServer Cloud project. You're going to go through exactly the same thing as you did before. You're going to actually build and deploy the PowerServer project just like you did in 2021 edition of PowerBuilder. You're then going to compile the actual PowerServer itself and execute it. So let's build and deploy the PowerServer project. So now that the deploy is done, let's compile the PowerServer server itself and run the web APIs. So now we see the PowerServer 2022 starting. Let's just move it out of the way here a little bit. And notice that we actually now have a debug here in the actual Project Painter. So when I click on that from the Project Painter, it's going to enter what you would normally see as a regular debugger. The only difference here at this point is the ability to actually start the debugger. You have to use the actual project toolbar, as opposed to the actual debugger up here on the main toolbar, which is now disabled because this is not a native client-server application. Notice at this point I have a couple of breakpoints here at the open of the application and the open of wmain. So I'm just going to go here and start the debugging session. Notice that there's actually a yellow arrow here, so we're actually at the connect. So we can actually step through this, and then we can have a look at the actual global objects, have a look at the transaction object, and we can see here at this point that the connect was done because we're actually sitting now at the if statement, and SQL code is 0, so this if statement is going to be true. And we can actually step through it at this point, step over it, or just continue on to the next breakpoint, which I'm going to do. Now you can see here we're at the open of wmain, so we can have a look here at the instance variables of that particular window. And we can see the instance variables, we can see the parent, we can see if there's any shared instance variables, objects that are in memory. We can see the call stack at this point, breakpoints, and the watch points that are going on as well. And of course you can use the right-hand mouse button to insert new breakpoints, insert new watch points, everything that you want to do before. And so we can actually back up, and then we can actually step through that statement again. Or we can just step out of this procedure altogether. So I'm just going to continue on here to the next breakpoint, which is, of course, the next statement after because I step backwards, and I'm going to continue again. So I've now got the application minimized a bit. You can see PowerServer working in the back. That's that DOS command window that you see here in the background. So with the application running, we can select customer, for example, and we can see the data actually coming back from PowerServer. Or we can select products. And again, you can see the interaction. Again, if we had breakpoints on customers and products, we can actually break those particular scripts and actually step through the code, step out of the code, set extra breakpoints, watch points, whatever you'd like, just as if this was a native PowerBuilder application. So this is a new feature, or one of the major ones coming in 2022. So again, connect with us on the community, again via YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and most importantly, the Appeon community webpage where you can ask questions, have a look at tech articles, look at some online training, and a lot more on PowerBuilder and PowerServer, and of course the rest of the Appeon products. So thanks for watching this little sneak peek into PowerBuilder 2022 and PowerServer 2022. More features are coming. This is just the first that has been released from engineering that you can have a look at. And there's a lot more coming, so stay tuned in 2022 when the GA version comes out. Our next keynote presenter is Zhenjin Zhang. He's the head of corporate IT for Douyi International Limited. They're a PowerServer customer, and they have a PowerServer user story about migrating legacy ERP system to the cloud. They have successfully done this and gone live with PowerServer project this past October. So take it away, Zhenjin.
Welcome to Elevate 2021. This session will talk about migrate legacy ERP system to be cloud app ready. I'm Jianxin Zhang from Douyi International, Singapore. The session agenda. I'm going to introduce the project overview, talking about those pain points, base deployment on client-server architecture. My cloud app deployment timeline and some important points to be highlighted. There will be a simple demo about me. I'm Jianxin Zhang. Started software development with PowerBuilder over 20 plus years. I have deep understood to business operation and process cycle. Lead a team to practice in the way of IT as business partner. Developed and supporting the full ERP system, which is covering finance, supply chain management, MRP, production planning, and manufacturing modules. In the past few years, we have some projects as follow. In year 2019, migrate ERP system and SQL database from on-premise to Azure Cloud Platform. Make use of RDS Web Access for remote workforce accessing to the client-server-based ERP system. Using PowerBuilder IDE and Azure SQL, which is hosting on Azure Cloud Platform. In year 2020, we started the digital transformation initiative. In year 2021, we have started ERP system cloud deployment and the e-approval workflow process to serve work from home requirement in a better way. About my company, our international subsidiaries are in the trading and manufacturing of semiconductor industrial to provide packing material and precision metal injection modeling. Let's look at the project overview. We are using latest PLC 2019 framework. Edit ribbon bar menu object from Appeon PowerBuilder IDE new feature. Integrate with full ERP enterprise resource planning modules, which include supply chain management, finance, account payable, account receivable, general ledger, fixed asset modules, planning and manufacturing, quality management, and service management. It will be considered as a full ERP system. We make use of most of PLC features, taking REST API call to send email, send message with attachment, also the report, also HTTP client API call, external function call from DLL, and the ribbon bar menu. That's how is the ribbon bar menu look like. And how is the ERP system homepage look like? This is the functioning screen, which is very much complicated and integrated with on-screen validation, close over all the system functionality. Let's look at the cloud app architecture. We as developers are working on client-server programming as per normal. Set up and deploy the PowerServer project to be first part, web downloadable client app, which is hosted on Azure virtual machine with the IIS installed. Second part, Azure App Service on the cloud. End users will launch the URL defined on the project, run options tab. Client app will check deployment version to determine whether there is need to update the app or not. Client app will access to the app service defined on the project web API tab, which in fact is transparent to end users. To share with you, before cloud deployment, we are facing pain points with client-server deployment. Performance issue, especially when majority staffs are working from home during this pandemic period. We were using RDS web accessing to handle remote workforce needs, while facing technical issues such as system handling, printing service down quite significantly. And RDS web access is highly relying on IE, which is not supported from Microsoft anymore. There is a third-party solution on VDI setup, which could be a solution while incurring high costs significantly when deploying for mass workforce. I would like to share my cloud app deployment journey and some of highlights. We started Appeon PowerBuilder 2020 beta preview since February 2021 and continue on Appeon PowerBuilder 2021 beta release from April 2021 onwards. Whenever have question, we post the query to Appeon community question and answer forum and got great help from experts. We also incurred some technical issues while we have successfully deployed the client-server ERP system to be cloud-ready. Great appreciation to Appeon supporting team for the help. Okay, some demo screens. Let me show you PowerServer project screens. And also Snap Developer PowerServer solution screen. Okay, for the hosting, we are using Azure Cloud. The benefit for the app service from Azure actually quite easy for us to upscale the service or downgrade the service on demand. And we choose to use Linux platform with the .NET 6, the early access. The reason we choose Linux actually is take consideration on the cost effective if compared to Windows instance. The cost will be almost half of the price for Windows platform. Okay, to be a summary, we are making use of web service from cloud provider to host app service. IIS web server on the cloud to host client app downloading and updating, which is the same approach as smart client concept. In terms of IIS setup for cloud app deployment, please refer to below link from Appeon website. Some recommendation from my experience. To deploy cloud app to IIS web server, so as all apps UIO, which is the place to run app from. To deploy PowerServer application service to cloud app service, be Azure or AWS to your choice. To set up second or backup IIS web server to host backup to all above IIS service for client apps UIO and application service, which is referring to PowerServer service. Well, that's all from me, and it is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your time, and all the best. Say goodbye to all of you.
Hello and welcome to the Elevate 2021 Keynote Question and Answer Time. We want to clarify that these questions were received during the conference registration. They are not questions received live during the actual broadcast. We repeatedly saw certain questions, so we have summarized them as best we could so they can be generally available, and hope you will find our answers useful. Now that you have seen the keynote, feel free to email any of our questions to product@appeon.com. We have a lot of participation in the Elevate 2001 conference this year, so we may be a bit overwhelmed responding to all of you, but we'll make a best effort to respond within a few business days. So now, let's get started. We've lined up dozens of great questions for you regarding PowerBuilder, PowerServer, and .NET Data Store. What is the best method to onboard new developers with PowerBuilder? Onboard, we mean basically going from I don't know much about PowerBuilder to be able to build and maintain a basic application. So if the developer has no experience with PowerBuilder, we recommend taking the free online course at Appeon University. You can see the URL here. Or working with one of our consulting partners for live training. If the developer is trying to learn about new features added to PowerBuilder, we also recommend checking out the Appeon community website for code samples, technical articles, and webinar recordings. What is the effort and issues faced to upgrade from really old versions of PowerBuilder? Well, what is really old? So you'd have to look at the fact that if you're on PowerBuilder 10 and above, one of the main migration considerations is the fact that you're Unicode based. And of course, so is Appeon PowerBuilder. However, if you're in a version of PowerBuilder 9 or older, that's when PowerBuilder was ANSI, so that ANSI to Unicode conversion can be a bit of a challenge. One of the best resources is the Migration Guide. It's a great resource that breaks down by PowerBuilder version the migration considerations and issues you may face. Appeon definitely recommends reading this documentation very carefully before proceeding with your app migration. If you need assistance for smaller things, you can try out the free Appeon community website. For a turnkey upgrade, you may want to actually reach out to one of our consulting partners. When will PowerBuilder Client Server get some love? Well, as Julie mentioned in the roadmap presentation, going forward, our 4 focus areas are core features, IDE enhancements, user interface modernization, and cloud. Starting from version 2022, cloud will be taking a backseat to the other 3. Now client server will definitely be receiving more attention. We hope you understand that over the past few years, Appeon had to prioritize cloud so that PowerBuilder could play catch-up. We also understand that this is the time to shift gears once again. Any data window enhancements to be expected? As Julie mentioned in the roadmap presentation, there are a number of enhancements planned for data windows. There are plans to support more modern graph types. We also have plans to support more features of rich text, would benefit rich text data windows as well as the rich text control. And for drop-down data windows, you'll be able to filter and search as you type. This is not an exhaustive enhancement list at this point, but just some of the things that we plan to do in the near future. Any IDE enhancements to be expected? Well, as demonstrated in the sneak peek demo of the PowerBuilder 2022, PowerBuilder 2022 will feature a tabbed interface in the IDE along with some useful enhancements such as an object name in the scripts and then jumping to that object and the actual code that relates to it. Searching for an expression has been enhanced, more system dialogues allowing resizing. And as Julie mentioned in the roadmap presentation, we are looking to bring an entirely new modern code editor experience to PowerBuilder IDE for the next major version after PowerBuilder 2022. Can I use Team Foundation Server / Azure DevOps with PowerBuilder? Well, first of all, you have to remember that TFS these days is now Git-based as its source code repository, and thus Git is supported by PowerBuilder since 2017 and newer. If you're looking to do DevOps, it is recommended to use PowerBuilder 2021 or newer because there are great enhancements that have been made to the automated build process and integration with Git Source Code Manager. You would use the new PB AutoBuild utility, which replaces the PBC or PowerBuilder compiler utility, by the way, and we recommend reading the tutorials in this documentation. PB AutoBuild allows you to do a lot more things than the old PBC utility. Will PowerBuilder libraries be eliminated and replaced with text files? Well, no. PowerBuilder libraries are very centric to exactly the way PowerBuilder IDE works, and even to some extent how many PowerBuilder users have programmed their applications to dynamically add and remove PowerBuilder libraries, for example using the set library list or add to library. Both from a perspective to our customers and research and development costs to Appeon, it's probably not going to make sense to change this. However, in the upcoming 2022 version of PowerBuilder, PowerBuilder libraries are not saved in the context of source control with Git or SVN Source Code Manager. Instead, your source code resides in pure text format in the Git SVN repository. PowerBuilder will automatically generate the new PowerBuilder libraries when obtaining the primary source code. We believe that this should alleviate most headaches caused by PowerBuilder libraries when doing source control. How to prevent decompiling of your PowerBuilder applications. Both client and server are leaps and bounds ahead of the traditional PowerBuilder deployment process. All your PowerBuilder libraries can be encrypted with strong AES encryption, which essentially makes them impossible to decompile. The PowerBuilder IDE assigns hash values to each deployment file, and these hash values are verified by the application launcher to make sure that no tampering has occurred. Best of all, Power Client is included for free as a standard feature of PowerBuilder Professional Edition and higher. Note that PowerServer is also a relatively low-cost add-on to PowerBuilder in the Cloud Pro edition. So again, both Power Client and PowerServer prevent decompiling of PBDs. How do I modernize the look and feel of my PowerBuilder applications? Well, that's a great question. UI themes and ribbon bar are now free options within the PowerBuilder IDE, at least the newer versions. These themes are essentially style sheets that will render your application in a modern way by simply configuring in the application painter or one simple PowerScript command, apply theme. We really hope that every PowerBuilder developer will at least try this, as it's the biggest bang for the buck UI modernization wise. The ribbon bar control is also giving you an app a much more modern navigation system, but this will require some coding to implement. As Julie mentioned in the roadmap presentation, Appeon have plans to introduce a tab document interface as well, and enhancements to the graph data window in the near future. Why did Appeon abandon dockable windows? Well, first of all, we inherited the code from PowerBuilder 12.6, which was the base code that we picked up in 2016. With all the existing features, dockable windows was just one of those things. However, after a deep look into the feature, we found that it was not salvageable. It required much more than just a bug fix here or there, rather a complete rewrite. As Julie mentioned in the roadmap presentation, user interface modernization is a key focus for PowerBuilder, and we plan to introduce a tab document interface, which many customers seem to prefer over dockable windows. What kind of code changes are necessary to use the new tab document interface? Our current design and plan is to implement the tab document interface as an option of MDI. In other words, you can configure whether you want an MDI to render under classic view, the way it is now, or in tab view. Although a demo of this feature was not ready for the Elevate conference, to the best of our knowledge, we don't think the extensive code changes should be necessary when configuring the tab view. Of course, the prerequisite for this is your app being based on the MDI type, as this app feature will be an option of MDI, Multiple Document Interface. Will PowerBuilder support the Mac OS? Well, historically, the answer has always been no, and from Appeon's point of view, we have no plans to support it either. PowerBuilder customers are standardized on the Windows operating system for desktops, laptops. Since the PowerBuilder virtual machine DLLs are tightly coupled to the Windows OS, there would have to be a huge demand to justify the re-engineering to support this OS. At this time, there is extremely low chance that this would ever be supported. We recommend instead of virtualizing the Windows OS for Mac OS users, or have them use a remote desktop into a Windows server to access your PowerBuilder applications. Can I develop web APIs in PowerScript? No, you cannot. PowerScript is a client-server programming language, so it is not supported to use in programming web APIs, also known as RESTful APIs. For server-side programming, we have standardized on C# and the .NET Core framework. We provide a non-visual data window called the .NET Data Store that supports most of the same properties, events, and functions of the PowerScript-based data store. This makes C# programming much closer to a PowerBuilder than you would imagine. There is also a PowerScript migrator utility to help automate conversion of existing business logic from PowerBuilder that you might want to expose as C# web APIs, which of course are RESTful based. How to migrate PowerScript NVOs to the REST web API? Well, PowerScript Migrator again is the utility included in the Cloud Pro edition of PowerBuilder. You need to be using version 2019 R3 or newer. This utility will automatically convert PowerScript-based NVOs, non-visual user objects, into C# classes, which can be easily wrapped as REST APIs, using built-in templates of the Snap C# Development IDE. Snap Develop is also included for free with your PowerBuilder subscription. However, some code changes will be required because PowerScript and C# are two different languages. Typically, 80–90% of the existing non-visual code can be automatically converted. From your PowerBuilder app, you can then consume the RESTful web-based APIs using the HTTP client or REST client objects with just a few lines of PowerScript code. What is the migration path and replacement of the obsolete .NET Web Service, also known as SOAP or .NET SOAP? So the use of the new HTTP client or REST client-based objects that are built into newer versions of PowerBuilder, you can basically access standard web services, be they SOAP or RESTful, with a few lines of PowerScript code. How can we learn about using the .NET Data Store to create web APIs? If you don't have any C# exposure, there are lots of learning resources out there. Just Google them, and many of them are available for free. As far as learning the .NET Data Store, we recommend first starting with the video replays from last year's Elevate conference. We have a great C# development track that focused on .NET Data Store, both synchronous and asynchronous programming. There are also code examples on the .NET Data Store developed by Appeon engineers. We recommend that you study this as a blueprint to build your application. Finally, if you feel that these free resources from Appeon are not enough, please reach out to one of our training partners for a live or customized training. Why is Appeon pushing PowerBuilder developers to C#? Well, basically, it's for cloud-native programming, requires multiple technologies. PowerScript and the PowerBuilder virtual machine are a framework that has been designed for client-side applications, and Appeon is not moving away from that. No matter if you are developing client-server apps or using PowerServer 2021 to deploy to the cloud, we are using all PowerScript for the client-side portion. It is only the server-side programming, such as developing web APIs, that we have standardized on C#. It didn't make sense to reinvent the wheel, but we added the data window technology to C# in the form of the .NET Data Store. So just to reiterate, Appeon is fully committed to PowerScript and has no intention of replacing it with C#. Is there a tool or plan for the migration of user interface pieces of PowerBuilder to HTML pages? Well, PowerBuilder has absolutely no plans for that, and there is no tool that exists that would migrate PowerBuilder visual objects and PowerScript to HTML Java code in a highly automated fashion. Appeon does not have plans to create such a migration tool because realistically it would not be possible to automate a lot of the producing a good result. Early versions of distributed PowerBuilder, for example, then EA Server, used HTML user interface, but PowerBuilder moved away from that back in 2003. PowerBuilder then added web forms in version 11, which was also HTML user interface, but was a large failure and thus was discontinued in PowerBuilder version 12.5. Is there a tool or plan for HTML development? Well, yes, there is. This is planned in the Snap Development 2022 will support HTML page development along with popular frameworks such as Angular, React, and Vue. However, we do not have plans to provide an HTML-based data window. Of course, you can still use the .NET Data Store for implementing your non-visual portion of your projects. Is there a tool or plan for mobile app development? Yes, there is. A version of Snap Development 2022 will support mobile app development with popular mobile frameworks such as React Native or Flutter. While we do not have plans to provide a data window visual object, you can still use the .NET Data Store for non-visual portion of your mobile app, calling it via RESTful web APIs. If I deploy my project to the cloud with PowerServer 2021, how will my client-side scripts work? Well, they'll work just fine. PowerServer 2021 supports nearly all PowerScript programming features, including registry functions, file functions, ActiveX, OLE components, printing to client printers. It's just some examples. It's really only the database connection mechanism that changes, moving all SQL, both inline and data window, to execute on the application server side. So pretty much anything you do in the client-server realm will still work with PowerServer 2021. We recommend studying, though, the unsupported features guide in the PowerServer documentation for a list of things that are not supported. Does PowerServer support the PFC? Well, absolutely. PFC is essentially just PowerScript code, and PowerServer supports nearly all PowerBuilder features. In fact, roughly 1/3 of Appeon PowerBuilder customers are using the PFC, and we've had many customers successfully already develop extremely large and complex PFC applications with PowerServer. Starting with version 2021, it's no longer necessary to use a special PowerServer compatible version of the PFC. So converting PFC apps should not be difficult than other existing PowerBuilder applications. Can PowerServer 2021 deploy old client-server app without a lot of rewriting and restructuring of the code? Well, the first thing, of course, you need to update to PowerBuilder 2021. If you are a recent version of PowerBuilder, usually no code changes will be required to upgrade. Once you upgraded to PowerBuilder 2021, then you'll be able to configure a PowerServer project so that the PowerBuilder knows how to deploy your application. The only mandatory code change required by PowerServer is the remediation of unsupported features and modifying how the database connections are made. But since almost all PowerBuilder features are supported, the code changes required are very minimal for most customers. Optionally, you'll be optimizing the application code to run more efficiently over the internet and securing your RESTful APIs and tokens, such as using OAuth or JWT. The required code changes should not take more than several weeks of effort if you're a typical application case. Even if your application is not a typical case, It should still be orders of magnitude less in effort and time than rewriting the whole application in another technology. Can I deploy multiple versions of PowerServer side by side? Well, absolutely. PowerServer apps are self-contained with their own PowerBuilder runtime libraries for the client side, and then PowerServer itself, its runtime libraries for the server side, using its own version of the .NET Core framework. Since these are self-contained, it can be run side by side with another PowerBuilder version, no matter if it's a different major versions or even a minor version. Also, PowerBuilder IDE is now decoupled from the PowerBuilder runtime, so that a single latest PowerBuilder IDE can support many runtime versions going back to older ones as far back as 2019 R3. What databases are compatible with PowerServer 2021? Well, basically the latest versions of ASE, Informix, MySQL, Oracle, Postgres, SQL Anywhere, and SQL Server are supported. Informix is marked as a beta feature in PowerServer 2021. When PowerServer 2022 is released, Informix will no longer be in beta mode. What operating systems are compatible with PowerServer 2021? Well, on the client side, we use native Windows PowerBuilder runtime, so the DLLs are still the same as Windows OS requirements for client-server. On the server side, we use the .NET Core, which supports many different operating systems. However, we have only tested Windows and Linux thus far, so that is all that we are recommending at this time. Why PowerServer 2021 does not support iOS or Android? Well, when we revamped PowerServer 2021 Cloud Native Architecture, we had the choice to revisit the client-side language. So we had to either stick with a native PowerScript and support almost all PB features, or dumb down the application to translate it to JavaScript under the covers. Since there is a very low demand for PowerServer to support iOS or Android applications, the choice became obvious. There is not to say that mobile application development is not popular, but most of our customers are not looking to load a complex existing Windows application onto a mobile device. How can we learn more about PowerServer 2021? You already are learning about PowerServer 2021 here at the conference. We have an entire technical track in Elevate 2021 dedicated to PowerServer 2021 that kicks off right after this keynote. Video replays will also be available on the Elevate website. You can always watch them again if required. We also recommend studying the various PowerServer how-to guides and tutorials in the documentation. If you feel that these free resources from Appeon are not enough, please reach out to our training partners for live and customized training. Will recordings of the keynote and technical sessions be available? Shortly after the conference has ended, we will be emailing all registered users, regardless of whether you attended or not, with instructions on how to watch the video replays on the Elevate website. Of course, if you are able to attend the technical sessions this afternoon and tomorrow, you'll be able to interact with the presenter live through the chat panel and also show your support to our presenters who have put in a lot of hard work to prepare these sessions just for you. Will Elevate 2022 continue to be an online conference? It's hard to say, it's a bit early at this point, but there's a high chance. We need to start planning the conferences well in advance. However, COVID's ability to mutate and break through infections makes it unlikely that things would be changing in the near future. I hope you enjoyed the question and answer session, and thank you for participating in Elevate 2021. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.